is an American? There's a reason that my US history final exam this spring will ask me to tackle this question. It's extremely complicated. Upon hearing it, my mind is instantly filled with dozens of further questions. Who decides who is an American? How can this change? My name is Sarah Jane O'Connor. I'm a junior here at Deerfield Academy, and my goal today is not to answer these questions, but rather to explore why exactly they can be so difficult to answer. The United States of America was essentially founded in 1776 when Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence. But before Mr. Jefferson was even born, this land that is now known as the home of the free and the brave began fulfilling its purpose. In 1620, the famous Mayflower sailed English separatists to the shores of Plymouth, Massachusetts, and this new world was for the first time a place of refuge. North America was becoming what now seems like a tired cliche, a land of opportunity. When Mr. Jefferson published his declaration, his words quickly became iconic. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. However, one key part of Mr. Jefferson's words has shifted its meaning remarkably since 1776. When the Declaration was first published, all men meant all white men who owned property. The United States was quite literally being built on the involuntary labor of thousands of slaves. Yet 250 years later, all men now includes all people, regardless of race, gender, or religion. Anyone can enjoy the privileges of being a citizen in this golden land of opportunity, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Being American does not speak to where you came from, but rather where you will go. However, history itself speaks to a major contradiction of the phrase, all men are created equal. Though a vast majority of US citizens today are the descendants of immigrants, this country has held a long history of utter hostility towards immigrants and refugees. Today, through exploring historic examples, I hope to examine why exactly we have held such a resistance to foreigners. I hope to call into question the all too common tendency to antagonize those who we consider other. I'm going to start with a group that anyone who's taking US history knows well, the Know Nothing Party. This group ironically referred to themselves as the American Party and began as an anti-immigrant secret society in the 1840s and 1850s. The Know-Nothings had a primary goal of ridding the United States of immigrant and Catholic political influence, and they achieved this by pressuring prominent political party officials to only elect native-born leaders. Though the Know-Nothings later declined, they left an indelible mark on US history by adopting an ideology directly counter to the words of our founding fathers. Soon-to-be President Abraham Lincoln addressed the Know-Nothings with one simple quote. He stated, "We begin by declaring that all men are created equal. When the Know-Nothings get control, it will read, all men are created equal, except Negroes and foreigners and Catholics." Though the Know-Nothings declined, pointed anti-immigration ideology continued in the United States, namely with Chinese exclusion. In the 1880s, industrial workers in California largely blamed Chinese immigrants for undercutting prevailing wage levels, and thus endorsed immigration restrictions on the Chinese. But their resistance to the Chinese went far beyond economic policy. In fact, the largest mass lynching in United States history was the Chinese Massacre of 1871, in which 500 white men systematically tortured and hung 20 Chinese immigrants in revenge for a Chinese man killing a local rancher. None of the rioters responsible for this massacre were charged for their crimes, and opposition to the Chinese only continued and became mainstream. In the 1880s, both major political parties included anti-Chinese immigration ideology within their platforms. And in 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which served as a to place a 10-year moratorium on Chinese immigration. Although it's clear that racial differences have been a key conflict all throughout US history, these examples show systematic resistance to immigration and an ideology still present today. Native-born citizens exhibited a sense of entitlement to domestic jobs, even if their ancestors had been immigrants just a few generations back. Opposition to foreigners continued into the 20th century. The Chinese Exclusion Act was not repealed until 1943, and in the 1930s, a poll asked US citizens a question that has a glaringly obvious answer today. Would we take in the victims of Hitler's anti-Semitism or reject them? The results were clear. 67% of those surveyed opposed taking in German refugees, while only 26% favored the proposition. Similar sentiments from US citizens were shown during the Vietnam War. In a poll, 62% agreed with the following statement: the Vietnam refugees will take jobs from US citizens in a time when unemployment is up, and that is wrong. While worries about job security are present all throughout history and society today, it's important to note that in this historic example, the notions of refugees coming to the United States and having jobs at all was seen as explicitly wrong, even if many of those surveyed were related to immigrants like this just a few generations back. This brings us back to my initial question: who is an American? And going further, who is entitled to the rights and privileges of citizenship in the United States? One such privilege being employment. These examples I've discussed expose a key but often overlooked tension in US history: nativism versus inclusion. While inclusion is the act of including many groups as one larger group, nativism is defined as the policy of protecting the interests of native-born inhabitants against those of immigrants. However, if you read a few entries down in the dictionary, nativism has another definition, specifically pertaining to philosophy. This reads, the theory that concepts, mental structures, and mental capacities are innate rather than acquired by learning. When considering nativism, the ideology that led groups like the Know-Nothings to political prominence, it is critical to consider both of these definitions. Nativism exists through the idea that one group, a native-born group, is inherently superior to all foreigners, with that superiority being something that is innate rather than acquired by learning. Nativist thinkers champion an ideology that today is more commonly known as racism. The belief that no efforts can equalize two groups, and that upward social mobility essentially cannot exist for a group that is inherently lesser than another. Throughout history, nativism has existed as a reaction, often in fear, of immigrants of different ethnic and religious backgrounds being more successful than native-born citizens. However, it is impossible to deny that immigrants and refugees have been as much a part of the fabric and history of the United States as native-born citizens. If we think back to the words of Thomas Jefferson, all men are created equal, it's clear. Rejecting foreigners is fundamentally un-American. Yet, the United States has made tremendous strides in the 20th and 21st century to more fully express the words of our founding fathers. 100 years ago, women did not have the right to vote. People of color were victim to explicit systematic inequality, and LGBTQ individuals would have to wait nearly a century for the right to marry. But the remnants of nativism are ubiquitous in the United States today. Our current president plans to build a wall to block Mexican immigration into the United States, capitalizing upon the claims that Mexican immigrants are stealing jobs entitled to Americans. This same individual advocates extreme vetting of refugees, focused on Muslims, and has attempted to ban immigration from 7 Muslim-majority nations. This man and many of his supporters claim that their actions are in the interest of protecting the United States, making it stronger, safer, and dare I say it, greater. However, they neglect two key facts. First, Mexican immigrants contribute $11 billion to the United States economy, and welcoming refugees has been proven to foster economic development in small-town America. I call upon all Americans to remember the words of Thomas Jefferson once again. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Despite our tattered history, it's hard to argue with what these words are supposed to mean for the United States today. Americans are not one nationality or race, but rather a unique blend of cultures and traditions brought together under a common goal of liberty and justice for all. This nation was founded on a fundamental principle of equality, but the extent of those included as equal has shifted dramatically throughout our history. Inevitably, it can and should continue to shift. As we enter a new political era, let us not forget the liberty upon which this nation was founded. Let us not forget the words etched beneath the Statue of Liberty in New York. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Let us keep this nation a place of refuge for the tired and the poor, just as it was for the Pilgrims in 1620. Let us not forget that all people are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as Americans. Thank you.